Just 4 minutes. That's all it took for one brutal, personal attack to trigger the most humiliating breakdown ever seen from an FBI director before. Congress, Representative Jasmine Crockett hadn't planned to end a federal official's career live on national television. Kash Patel hadn't imagined that his loyalty to Trump would become a weapon turned against him. Cameras caught every second of the unraveling. America witnessed an FBI director lose his composure under unrelenting congressional pressure. What did the Texas Congresswoman reveal about corruption within the government that made the nation's top law enforcement official visibly collapse in real time? This wasn't a standard oversight hearing. It was the moment when concrete evidence collided with sharp personal confrontation, creating one of the most explosive congressional showdowns in modern FBI oversight history. November 6, 2025, 3:22 p.m. House Judiciary Committee hearing room. Fluorescent lights cut harshly across the mahogany table, where America's most controversial FBI director was about to endure the most damaging examination of his career. Representative Jasmine Crockett entered the chamber like a prosecutor who had spent weeks preparing an airtight case against institutional corruption. Her burgundy blazer projected authority she would soon turn into her sharpest weapon. Her legal background gave her the precision needed to dismantle a federal leader in full public view. Across the table sat Kash Patel, the FBI director and one of Trump's most devoted allies. His navy blue suit and red tie symbolized that loyalty. The FBI badge on his chest reflected the same committee lights that would soon spotlight the worst professional breakdown in federal law enforcement oversight. What Patel didn't know was that Crockett had spent days reviewing every scandal, every misstep, and every controversial decision that had defined his tenure. Each of those failures was now prepared to be used against him. The hearing had been called to examine growing concerns over the FBI's direction under his leadership, rising death threats against members of Congress, the spread of white supremacist domestic terrorism, the purge of veteran FBI officials, and the diversion of resources from counterterrorism to immigration enforcement. But this wasn't going to be the usual exchange of statements and political grandstanding. Crockett had evidence, and she was ready to use it. "Director Patel," she began, her tone deceptively calm. Her voice carried the measured authority of a seasoned Texas attorney who had now brought that precision to Capitol Hill. "You got a little upset and put on a show for your boss, because it seems like you're trying to save your job after your talk with Senator Booker yesterday." The opening remark was sharp, personal, and impossible to counter with routine bureaucratic responses. Patel's expression tightened immediately. He knew this wouldn't be a normal hearing. "Congresswoman, I reject that characterization," Patel began cautiously. But Crockett pressed on, unfazed. "Let's talk about your failures," she said, her tone shifting into that of a cross-examiner. "Before you were even confirmed, and as one of my colleagues mentioned, you were already targeting career officials for removal, planning illegal firings before taking office." The allegation was precise and devastating. It implied that Patel had been preparing politically motivated purges even before assuming his role, violating fundamental protections for federal employees. His confidence began to falter. He gripped the table tightly as it became clear she had documentation. "These cases you were so upset about, the ones tied to Trump, they came through your office," Crockett continued, methodically stripping away his attempts to shift blame to others. The Trump connection was intentional and deeply damaging. Patel's defense of his actions now appeared less like institutional duty and more like partisan loyalty. "And honestly," Crockett continued, "when people say they feel safe under your leadership, I don't know who they're talking about. Because I don't feel safe in this country, except maybe the white supremacists do. As a black woman, I certainly don't." The room fell silent. This was more than a policy critique. It was personal. A sitting member of Congress had just declared that she didn't feel protected under Patel's leadership. Patel went pale. "And to be honest, my colleagues have been polite to you today, and I respect that. But I don't share their patience," Crockett said, her tone tightening. "Several of us have received death threats." Her voice turned personal and sharp. She wasn't speaking as a politician, but as someone whose safety was directly endangered. In fact, she continued, someone actually tried to kill one of my colleagues, and frankly, I don't believe that under your leadership the FBI would even catch those responsible. I have no confidence in you. The statement hit like a blow. Patel visibly flinched. Crockett wasn't just questioning his performance, she was questioning his integrity and his commitment to protect public officials. And if we're talking about why I lack confidence, she went on, let's start with your refusal to acknowledge simple facts, like where most of these threats are coming from. The vast majority originate from right-wing extremism. She was building her argument methodically, turning Patel's evasions into evidence of bias. His refusal to name the problem was, in her hands, proof of complicity. Number 1, I have a couple of unanimous consents, Crockett said, pulling out a stack of official documents that served as exhibits in her case. What followed was a masterclass in congressional oversight. Crockett formally entered multiple pieces of evidence into the record, each documenting threats made against Republican members of Congress. She cited Tennessee's Tim Burchett, one of several Republicans who received death threats after voting against Jim Jordan for House Speaker. The impact was devastating, because these were threats against members of Patel's own party. This wasn't partisan theater. These were facts, drawn from his own agency's files. Another Republican lawmaker said she received death threats after voting against Jim Jordan. Crockett continued, her tone unwavering. Each document she entered stripped away Patel's credibility, exposing his failure to confront the very extremism growing under his watch. There's another case, she added, her voice heavy. A colleague is leaving Congress because his wife was receiving anonymous threats so severe she began sleeping with a firearm. The weight of her words hung over the chamber, the sound of institutional failure echoing in every corner. The image was disturbing and painfully specific. A congressional spouse forced to sleep beside a firearm because of threats that the FBI, under Patel's leadership, had failed to address. Patel's composure was gone. His confidence had completely evaporated as Crockett continued to document the real human consequences of his leadership failures. Here's the problem, she said firmly. How are we supposed to have confidence in you when you told the Senate yesterday it would take 14 years to fully staff the FBI? The question was devastating, using Patel's own public statements as ammunition. He had essentially admitted failure while attempting to defend himself, and Crockett seized on it with precision. You're also diverting resources so agents can go out and play ICE officers on the streets, she continued, her tone sharpened by restrained anger. The phrase play ICE agents cut deep. It mocked Patel's leadership and reduced the FBI's mission to political theater. Under his direction, the nation's premier law enforcement agency looked more like an extension of immigration enforcement than a federal institution protecting public safety. You're removing your most capable people, Crockett pressed, referencing the systematic purge of experienced personnel that had defined Patel's tenure. Each accusation reinforced the last, forming a complete portrait of an agency deliberately weakened from within. And even when it involves someone you call a friend, she added, you were out having a fancy dinner. And not only did you post once about the arrest, you posted twice, both times incorrectly, before taking a victory lap. The social media failure was humiliating. It showed Patel focused more on publicity than on professionalism or operational accuracy. Because honestly, Crockett continued, if those parents hadn't turned in their own child, it doesn't look like your team would have solved the case, even though the suspect confessed online. That was the final blow. The FBI hadn't solved the case. The suspect's own parents had done what Patel's agency couldn't, while he took credit for the work. Patel was visibly unraveling. His face had gone pale. His hands trembled slightly. The confident demeanor he usually displayed in front of the media had completely disappeared. So I'm trying to understand, Crockett said coldly, what exactly the FBI is doing under your leadership, besides putting on a show for The Apprentice, or whatever you want to call him. The sarcastic apprentice reference hit with precision, reducing Patel's loyalty to Trump to nothing more than reality TV performance instead of serious law enforcement leadership. And the day after all this, Crockett continued, there was a domestic terrorism incident targeting HBCUs. Yet I heard nothing from the FBI. This final piece of evidence was perhaps the most damaging. While Patel had been posting self-congratulatory messages, real acts of domestic terrorism against historically black colleges and universities were going unanswered. Black Americans keep asking, "How did we get here?" she said. Because the numbers are undeniable. White supremacy is a growing problem. The moral weight of her statement was crushing. Patel's failures were not only operational, they carried racial and societal consequences. And frankly, she added, I haven't heard anything from you today that makes me believe you'll do anything about this white supremacy crisis. The same crisis responsible for children being shot, communities being attacked, and people being murdered in their own churches. Crockett's conclusion was both morally piercing and personally direct. She was no longer just pointing out policy errors. She was questioning Patel's very commitment to protecting vulnerable communities. The committee room was silent. Everyone understood the magnitude of what had just happened. Crockett had laid out, step by step, every major failure of Patel's leadership, supported by his own words, his public record, and undeniable evidence. When Patel tried to respond, his voice cracked. The once confident federal official who had entered the hearing now appeared broken, his authority destroyed by 4 minutes of relentless questioning. Congresswoman, he managed. The FBI under my leadership has prioritized threats based on evidence and assessments to the classified files, but his words sounded visibly in panic. Powerless after Crockett's the video was the final blow. It destroyed every remaining show for your boss narrative. Instantly became the defining quote of the hearing. He was alive. Patel's entire tenure was now summarized as a performance for protection, rather than the chamber erupted into chaos as reporters realized they were social media erupted. The most devastating government scandal in American history began trending worldwide. Attorney General as Americans replayed the exchange, rose the most thorough public dismantling of an FBI director in modern congressional history. It made the federal government complicit in their crimes. Became viral shorthand for political loyalty overriding competence. Instantly silenced Patel's visible breakdown on camera showed Patel and Bondi meeting personally with Jeffrey Epstein at a secure federal facility in January. With legal experts calling it the most devastating congressional oversight hearing since Watergate. You turned federal law enforcement into a criminal enterprise. Moral clarity and legal skill had created a perfect storm of accountability. Confirmation that the FBI even congressional Republican general struggled to defend Patel after the country's most notorious. The evidence was overwhelming, while denying moral arguments unassailable. And the visuals Patel and Bondi gathered their materials. FBI agents, with trembling hands, released an unprecedented statement criminal exposure, concern about leadership as they moved toward the exit of Congress. Delivered her closing statement. Recognized that the Bureau's credibility Attorney General Bondi, who could your resignations are meaningless. Crumble under it. You will face the hearing became a turning point in how Americans view the FBI under Trump federal leadership. Patel's visible participation in symbolized the failure of appointing loyalists over the evidence is overwhelming. Within 48 hours, the American public now knows the truth about your Patel's resignation flooded Capitol Jeffrey Epstein's even Trump's allies admitted privately that his director had become a liability. The hearing room, a symbol left behind not only ruined careers, but also the collapse of public trust became federal law enforcement. Critique of the Trump era. The evidence presented by Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett rather than skill, had done more than expose two when genuine accountability arrived. It had revealed a systematic performance cemented the FBI and DOJ, Congress's most formidable, most dangerous criminal networks. A lawmaker whose legal training and moral conviction, as America absorbed the scale of the revelations of government Epstein's victims finally had hope for justice. In the end, the cover-up was broken. The hearing proved that the evidence was the most powerful weapon against corruption. The officials who had shielded the abusers were finally facing accountability. Its preparation, the 79 seconds that destroyed Kash Patel and Pam Bondi's careers, Representative Jasmine Crockett, of the largest criminal real congressional oversight still works. History, when carried out that would finally seek justice for Jeffrey Epstein's victims. This dramatized account explores the themes of oversight, accountability, and the dangers of political appointments. The dialogue and reactions are constructed for narrative effect, while reflecting real debates about FBI leadership and democratic integrity.